Hello, and welcome to the Nourish with Purpose podcast. I'm Bailey, and I'm so glad you are joining me this Wednesday for this episode. It is absolutely packed to the brim with information, and I'm really excited to just share the knowledge I have of nutrition with you and hopefully make it very comprehensible, something that's just not overwhelming to the everyday person that this isn't their job, right? This is kind of my job to know a lot of what I'm going to share about, but at the same time, you knowing it is only going to add value to your life. So before we get into that, I wanted to start first with a catch-up. So I wouldn't say there's too much going on in my life personally, but business-wise, I wanted to share with you too that I just released my second ebook, and it's going to be done in parts. So part 1 is released, and you can actually download it for free if you go to the link in my bio on Instagram or on Facebook. And you can download part 1, which is all about the body. So I go into the anti-inflammatory diet, as well as where you should start when it comes to changing your diet and the foods that you're consuming, as well as exercise. So we talk about how you should move your body, and I also include some questions in there for you to ask yourself to really help you understand that starting point for you, because it's going to look different for everybody. Other than that, I've mostly just been focusing on releasing this podcast, and I also wanted to thank you so much for the support that I received after I released it. I know I talked a lot about the vulnerability that I was, kind of scared to share, but at the same time, I always know vulnerability leads to connection, and that's just my ultimate goal, is to connect with other people, make you not feel so alone on your journey, because I know how complex it can be, how frustrating it can feel, and I just really hope this becomes a good outlet for you to learn more about nutrition and wellness, but also just learn more about yourself. So thank you again, just so much. I really have appreciated all of the kind messages and you sharing it on your stories on social media. That always just makes my day. So let's go ahead and get into now this segment of how I'm nourishing my mind, body, and spirit, knowing that we have to have balance in all three to truly live a very healthful life. So I would say with how I'm nourishing, or how I've nourished my body this past week, is I'm really trying to focus on increasing my protein intake. And so this looks like trying to get 20 to 25 grams of protein at every meal, including the afternoon snack that I have. And this is not something that's very easy for me. I think a lot of us are lacking in the amount of protein we're consuming, and I'm going to share more about that too in this episode, but I think the best way you can work on increasing your protein intake is finding protein sources that you enjoy. So for me, that has been chomps, those like beef sticks. I get the turkey and the beef ones. I really love to have, 2 to 3 eggs in the morning for breakfast. I'll have a Lara bar or a protein powder. And I have been on the hunt for a good protein powder, and I finally found one that does not taste chalky. It doesn't taste I don't know. Some protein powders are just not it. But the Juice Plus one that I just got, I got French vanilla. It's their original protein powder. It is so darn good. So every morning I have a smoothie with, it's like 2 tablespoons of that. I do a frozen banana, some ice, water, and then 1 tablespoon of natural peanut butter. And that is tastes like Ben & Jerry's ice cream to me. It's so delicious. And so that is a way that I'm also adding in more protein that's actually enjoyable. Other than that, though, at every meal, we just try to have a meat source. Very rarely would we have a meal that doesn't have some source of protein, animal protein especially. So it looks like hamburger, turkey. I'm doing a pork tenderloin right now in the crock pot. But yeah, I would say, that was kind of a long-winded answer, but increasing my protein intake. I just know with, me getting back into running and me lifting weights, it's really important that I'm also giving my body the support it needs to increase in its strength and endurance. How I am nourishing my mind. Right now, I am trying to set out with 3 major tasks for the day. And so this looks like writing out only 3 things that I want to get done that day. And then if something would come up that I forgot about or need to do, then I'll fill that in. But what I had been doing in the past is just writing out a long to-do list, which is just, I would say, something that I do just because I like to feel busy all the time. I believe that's kind of how I feel valued, which is something I'm definitely working on, but it's just having such a long to-do list. So I'm writing out 3 things I want to do during the day and then getting those done and stopping, right? And feeling accomplished after that, because those are 3 major things that I needed to do and I got them done. And that has really stemmed from that 5-minute journal I talked about last week on last week's episode, because in there it says to write out, your accomplishments for the day. And then in the morning, actually, it has you write out one thing you want to accomplish or a few things you want to accomplish. And so that really makes you think, okay, if I do that one thing, I've already done what I set out to do today. So you don't leave the day feeling like a failure because you didn't get everything on your to-do list done, but rather you prioritize the one thing you really needed to get done and you did it. And so I'm really, really loving that change. How I'm nourishing my spirit. I have been trying to go on morning walks with my dog Luna, and I either go with or without a podcast. This is good for my spirit just in the sense that I get outside, I get fresh air. It completely changes my mindset. I'm working on, supporting my body through walking, but also I just genuinely feel so much joy when I'm out on my walks. And it doesn't come really from it even being a physical activity, but rather it's me just spending time in nature, which I think is so calming for me. And a lot of times working at a desk, I don't get to doing that sometimes. And if I do, it's later in the evening. And by that point, I'm tired. I'd rather probably just lay on the couch and watch TV. And so really prioritizing that in the morning, especially going out with Luna and seeing how happy it makes her when we go for walks, has just been really fulfilling. So with that, I feel like we should just go ahead and get into the bulk of this episode, which is titled Food Heals, Nutrition Foundations, and Conquering Fears. So the reason I wanted to touch on this today is because nutrition really is that solid foundation that you can build upon, right? So I always encourage people start first with nutrition, and then if you want to get into exercise, by all means, go for it. But if your nutrition and how you're nourishing your body is not up to par, right? If it is not serving you well, if it's not healing your body and making you physically feel really, really good, then that is an area of weakness, and that's something that should be, focused on, right? And with that comes mindset work, and I'm going to touch on that today too, because those two are very intertwined. But the reason too why I'm so passionate about nutrition is because when I was struggling with chronic pain and inflammation, I was on medications, but when I got off the medications, I knew I needed to support my body in another way. And food was kind of what I had turned to, right? So I went through that phase, which if you listen to episode 1, where I had a really unhealthy relationship with food. But as I started to build that relationship and become comfortable with food, I've noticed how crucial it is that we get the adequate nutrients our body needs to function at a really high capacity. That is something that we just cannot forget about, because when you do, that's when you notice inflammation. So inflammation in itself too. So inflammation really is the source of all disease and all ailments, which was so crazy when I finally learned that, right? My back pain was an inflammatory response to the injury in my back. So for example, if you have really painful periods, that is a direct reflection of the inflammation in your ovaries during that time. And so working on ways to nurture your body, especially during different seasons of your life, is really important to help, decrease swelling, redness, pain, discomfort, bloating, digestive inflammation is a huge one. That is going to be a result of you having a really highly processed diet and eating poor foods. You're constipated, you're uncomfortable, you're constantly bloated. Inflammation is such a big part of society today, especially. And so learning that food can decrease inflammation was like a flip switched in my mind. Like, okay, wow, like I didn't know that food was that powerful. I just guess I never really thought of that. I kind of thought of it more as something I needed to eat to get through the day and to stay alive, rather than treating it like medicine and like a powerful source that we have really unlimited access to in the United States. So I also am so passionate about this because I've seen inflammation heal people time and time again with the clients that I work with. So when I start with the coaching work that I do, it is anti-inflammatory focused, and we do an inflammation session at the beginning of the program. So depending on how you rate on this score, if you're above an 8, that means that that is a primary inflammation source. So there are 7 different categories you could have inflammation, and a lot of clients that I have are actually over 8 in every category. And so we take this at the beginning, middle, and end of working together. And at the end of 16 weeks, most of my clients have split most of their scores in half. So I had one client, she was at a 28. She moved down to a 16. Yes, still inflamed halfway through the program, but by the end of it, she was then down to a 9. So you can see how gradually we're able to decrease the inflammation in our body because we focus on our food intake and the stress and the mindset work that comes behind that. Okay, so I wanted to give you just tangible ways that you can start to focus on your nutrition that they might be a little overwhelming, but they are not meant to be, right? They are meant to be starting points for you. So when I'm talking throughout this episode, this is not something that you should implement every single thing I talk about right away, okay? Because if you take everything in from this episode and try to implement it right now, you probably will not be successful long term. And that sounds harsh, but it's very true because you're just going to be so overwhelmed that you won't truly know how to focus on every area. And that's okay, right? When I started my nutrition journey, my diet looked so much different than it does today. If you would look at what I was eating 2 to 3 years ago, it was so much different. Even 6 months ago, right? We're always evolving, but like when I had started, I would say like my bad eating habits, which I don't necessarily like to say good or bad, but like my pretty unhealthy eating habits is I focused on having very low calorie foods. I consumed a lot of fat-free foods, or I avoided fat in general, right? Avocados were not on my menu. I really tried to avoid peanut butter. Olive oil, I would instead use water to saute anything or steam vegetables. And that's because I had a fear of fat, which I think is pretty common among women especially too. Along with this, I was on a low-carb diet. So I had talked about how I tracked my food for years. And the biggest thing I tried to do was limit my intake of carbs. And I would also, like I said, track my daily intake. So those were not good habits when I started, but also when I look back 2 to 3 years ago, there were some really good things that I was doing, right? I pushed myself to learn more about food. I think that's the biggest one because it led me to where I am right now. But it led me to know what a carb, a fat, a protein, and fiber meant, like what category that certain foods would fit into. Really, I just knew what was a fat and what was a carb. When it came to other sources, I viewed peanut butter more like a protein when really it's more like a fat. And I just didn't have a lot of clarity around that, so I encouraged myself to learn. I also learned what ingredients were inflammatory. I also consumed a lot of fruits and vegetables. Although I was tracking my food and trying to be very, very low calorie, which fruits and vegetables would fit into that category, it still encouraged my consumption of those products. So I was increasing my consumption of fruits and vegetables. At that time, it was linked to wanting to consume less calories or as few as possible during the day. But at the same time, it was supporting my body. And I also really tried to make the switch to more natural options. So when I say natural, I mean like instead of having a white sugar, I use honey or maple syrup or coconut sugar. So it's like finding things that have been highly processed versus sugars that are in their natural state, not been super highly processed and come from the earth, which you could argue that is the same way with like white sugar, right? The thing is white sugar has been bleached. It's been very highly processed to look like what it does, whereas natural sugars would be, for the most part, in their raw form. So that was something else I really tried to focus on too. And so eventually I want to do a whole deep dive into these things in specific in the episodes to come. But first I want to start with what I would recommend from a nutrition standpoint to someone looking to make shifts towards an anti-inflammatory, whole foods, and just a high quality diet in itself. So the first one that I wanted to touch on, because you cannot talk about food without talking about your mindset, is focusing first on your mindset. So this means that you have to identify why you are starting all of this in the first place. So there are some questions that I wrote down that I want you to ask yourself if this is something you're interested in pursuing, okay? So the first one is, think of if you're doing this for positive reasons or because you don't like what you see when you look in the mirror. So is this because you want to decrease inflammation, you want to decrease the bloating and the uncomfortableness and the heaviness you feel every day? Or is it because you look in the mirror and you're constantly picking apart things about yourself that you hate? The next one is, are you wanting to lose weight, if that is a goal of yours, because it's a health concern or because you don't feel good enough how you are, right? Is it because it is a health reason that you want to lose weight, or are you truly just trying to lose until you whittle away to barely anything? All right. Number 3, are you looking to remove and replace foods because you crave control? Or is it because you genuinely want to feel better more than anything else? So many of the clients that I see crazy success in are the ones that come to me and say, I do have a goal to lose weight, but more than anything, I want to physically feel good because I haven't physically felt good for 8 to 10 years. That is their primary. They are looking for something that'll help with how they feel, and that is their number one more than what they look like. And those both too, they are linked. If you start to feel good, you're going to want to exercise more. You're going to want to volunteer more. I had a client tell me yesterday, I just feel so good. I finally feel like going out in public and I'm going to volunteer. I've signed up to help with the food bank at school. It's like, yeah, because that is all a reflection of you feeling good. And we got to that point, so now you can just continue to build upon it. Another question too would be, what are my fear foods, or foods that you've told yourself most of your life are bad and should be avoided? So there is a difference between avoiding foods due to its nutrient density or lack of versus genuine fear of how it's going to maybe alter your physical appearance. So for me, I had mentioned before, this was carbs. If I ate carbs, I thought I knew that I would instantly gain weight. That is when I would pack on more weight, is when I ate carbs. When in reality, that wasn't necessarily the case for me, but that was when breads became a really big fear. And how I worked through that too is it was a long process of doing a lot of mindset work, but I also started making my own bread. And then I grew an appreciation for bread. So I started making sourdough bread. And if you know anything about making sourdough bread, it is an act of love. It takes a full 24 hours to make a loaf or two, and you have to feed the starter every day until it ferments, right? So you feed your starter every day. Once it's fermenting, then you can use it. But it's something you take care of daily. And for me, I would say that this has been a very therapeutic way to get through that fear of mine, is to make bread, which I was so scared of for the longest time, and eat really, really good bread that makes me feel really good because there's minimal ingredients in it, right? There's 3 ingredients in sourdough bread. And so that was kind of how I would say I got over that fear, but that is going to look different for everyone. Okay, so once you've answered those questions, I want you to start doing daily affirmations around the results that you got. So even if your answers were fairly positive, right? I still want you to do this because when you start to focus on food, even your relationship, that might be healthy with food, can get a bit obsessive or hyper aware. So even if you have a healthy relationship with food, I'd still encourage you to do this because we can almost go a little too far. We push it a little too far and then it's like, oh, maybe I should backtrack because I'm maybe not at the most healthy state anymore. Okay, so these affirmations could or would look like, I recognize that currently I feel blank this way about food, but choose to appreciate the body I've been given and treat it with love rather than hate. So I know you might be thinking, okay, come on, Bailey, like this is weird. And I know it's going to feel very awkward, very uncomfortable at first, because we typically do not like to compliment ourselves. We don't like to say loving, kind things to our bodies because if we have a history of not doing that, it's very, very uncomfortable, right? But I want to remind you too, you do not have to share this with anyone. So you can be as vulnerable and honest as you feel like being with yourself and know that nobody's going to read it. You can be gushy or even really mean to yourself because you're going to work through that and get past that stage, but you really have to go through that and dedicate the time to working on your mindset first before I really believe you should dive into focusing on nutrition. So before I even get started, if you feel like you're at a point where, okay, I really need to focus on my mindset before I go any further, pause this episode, listen to it after you've done a week, 2 weeks, a month of those mindset prompts and really build yourself up to have a comfortable relationship with food. And then I would have you, kind of continue on with this episode. But if you feel ready to dive into nutrition, get some of those core foundational methods that I use, then keep listening. Okay, so number 2 is going to be to focus on the core 4 method. So this looks like having a carbohydrate, a healthy fat, a lean protein, and fiber in every single meal. So now if you're new to learning about food and knowing what food identifies with each category, I'm going to give you a visual tool that I really think will help over just, the core 4 method. So this is going to look like having a fourth of your plate be fruits, a fourth of your plate be vegetables. So the reason why I encourage you to do this is because they are both a carb and a fiber. So they both contain the nutrients that your body needs to function at that high capacity that I've been talking about. So like vegetables, for example, they contain folate or vitamin B. So these vegetables would be like spinach, beetroot, butternut squash, mushrooms, potatoes. And often women or men take multivitamins to get those specific vitamins that they could really just get if they had more fruits and vegetables in their diet. Because we typically don't get enough of that throughout the day, right? So this helps with cell growth and function. So you are truly supporting every cell in your body with the food you consume. And I just think that is a very insane thought, right? And that's also why I talk about how food should be first, after mindset, of course, but because you truly heal your body from the inside out. Every cell is affected by the food that you're eating. And when we think about it like that, it's like, okay, maybe you want to honor your body just a little bit more with the type of food you're eating rather than something that is highly processed and is going to, in result, lead to an increase of inflammation. So I want to go over ways that you can prepare vegetables to make them both taste good and be something that is really easy to just throw into any meal. Okay, so you could saute, steam, eat them raw, or roast them in an air fryer or oven. We also in the summer really like to put vegetables on the grill. So I'll do like onions, mushrooms, a bell pepper, and I'll put a little bit of olive oil, salt and pepper, and then put it on the grill, and it gets a really good flavor. It takes like 10 minutes maybe to do that, and you have a really good side dish at your meal. And so this is also something that you can add that healthy fat to. So when we think about healthy fats, that's going to be an olive oil, ghee, tallow, a high quality butter or raw butter, avocado oil, or coconut oil. Okay, so this is where that healthy fat can come in. You can use that healthy fat that we are not fearing, right? Because healthy fats are so good for your body and especially for your brain, but we're adding that to something like our vegetables and we're kind of getting like a 2-for-1, right? So that is a way that you can prepare your vegetables. I always recommend to season with either like an anti-inflammatory spice or herbs. So that could be like a sea salt, a pepper, a turmeric, ginger, garlic, anything you can get to add just extra flavor to your food that's also benefiting your body. And then when it comes to preparing fruit, I really feel like the only way we can eat fruit is raw, but ways to even make this more cost effective is buying, if you have a big family, buy a watermelon or two, slice that up and it'll probably last you half the week, if not more. Okay, or, same could be with any melon or pineapple. Apples are really cheap. Bananas are extremely cheap. I think they're like 43 cents a banana or a pound, however they factor that in. But eating fruits and vegetables can be really affordable if you go about it in a way that makes sense for you and your family. And again, like I said, that's going to be very different for everyone. But just know, like, if you are on the search to eat affordable and eat really good food, you can find fruits and vegetables that are very low in cost. Very low in cost vegetables would be your broccoli, your peppers, onions are super cheap, tomatoes are super cheap. And so with that too, you can kind of decide what you want your meals to look like depending on what's in your fridge or what you bought when you were shopping last. Okay, so then we're moving on to, you should have a fourth of your plate starchy carbs. So you've got 1/4 vegetables, 1/4 fruits, and those can kind of be interchanged, right? If you wanted to do half a plate of vegetables, by all means, go for it. But I always like to have the balance of both. Okay, and then you do 1/4 a plate of starchy carbs. So this is going to look like your sourdough breads, brown or white rice, quinoa, oatmeal, sweet potatoes, couscous, really a lot of those grains. And you could also add a healthy fat to this, like on my sourdough bread. If I have, I'll just give you an example because this might be a really easy way to think about it. I'll do that saute mix on the grill like I had just talked about. I'll do a side of pineapple. I'll do 1 large chicken breast. And then as my side, I might do a slice of sourdough bread. And I will put on, half a tablespoon of ghee, which is a clarified butter. And it tastes delicious. It's great for my body. It's a high quality butter and product. And so that is also another way you can add that into your meal, right? So you could either add the healthy fat into your vegetable, or you could add it onto your carb, right? If you're having a sweet potato, add a scoop of butter, or you could also do, other sources of healthy fat would be an avocado. So if I'm doing toast, if I don't do butter, I'll do half an avocado. It's just not fearing consuming fat and not letting the fear of that control your life, which again, that is where mindset comes in, because that is so valid to have that fear, because when you go to the shelves at the grocery store and you shop, it's like, well, okay, look at these quote health foods, they're sugar-free and fat-free, when in reality, those are not true health foods. Health foods are consuming the natural sweeteners I had talked about and healthy fats, and not fearing having fat in our products. And that will come with time. If you're still at the point where you're like, I don't know if I can really get behind having regular products over the sugar-free or fat-free, just understand that that is going to be a gradual change. But those are 2 ways that I would encourage you to gradually increase your fat intake. Healthy fat intake would be either in a vegetable or in your carb. Okay? And so carbs, why they're so important is because they fill you up and they give you energy, right? So if you had just a chicken breast and a plate with half fruits and half vegetables, yeah, it's going to fulfill you because there's fiber, right? Fiber, fruits and vegetables contain a lot of water content. So it's going to fill your stomach up. But, if you think maybe an hour or 2 down the road, you're probably going to be hungry again. And that's because you didn't have that starchy carb. Okay. So, when we talk about low carb diets too, I will say they do work if you're looking to lose weight, but there is a huge but in there. That is just because these types of carbs that you're choosing to avoid are probably actually very highly processed, and those contain a high amount of calories. So if you are thinking, okay, I need to go on a low carb diet because I want to lose weight fast, I'm not going to say that it doesn't work, because when I avoided carbs, I did lose weight, but at the same time, that was not a healthy way to go about it. And number 2, the reason that I lost weight was not necessarily because of the carb themselves, but it was because before, the carbs that I was eating looked like chips. It looked like sugary cereal. It looked like Cheez-Its and Goldfish. And I'm not saying you can't eat those foods, but that was what a majority of my carbs looked like. They didn't look like quinoa or couscous or sourdough bread, right? Like that was a completely different phase of my life, and I was eating very, very different carbs. So when I removed those carbs, yeah, I lost weight, but that's because those were so highly processed that my body didn't actually want them, right? For me to be consuming that every single day, and as much as I was, my body was like, okay, it was able to kind of relax because it wasn't constantly inflamed by the highly processed carbs I was eating. So hopefully you notice the difference there too. It's not necessarily the carbs that are evil, it's the quality of your carbs. Okay, so if you're eating high quality carbs like I've listed, like your body is going to absorb that and love the energy that it gets from that, right? And so if you try to avoid carbs too, you're going to notice a depletion in your energy levels. And so this is going to lead to, brain fog or a lack of focus. So the carbs listed above that I had just mentioned, are benefiting your body because they're not highly processed. So you're not going to immediately gain weight if you start to eat bread again, right? I want to comfort you with that, because if you would have told me that, I would have been like, you're lying to me. I don't believe you. I think all carbs are evil, right? So it is a gradual journey. And I have to be so mindful of that because I know how sensitive nutrition can get. And there's so much information out there that just almost makes your head want to explode, right? Like I had a client talking to me and she was asking me these really good questions, but she was also listening to a variety of different podcasts that were telling her all different things, right? It was saying, well, you should go on a carnivore diet. Well, actually eating plant-based is best because animal protein contains a lot of cholesterol, yada, yada. Like it just goes on. And it's like, where the heck do I even start? Where can I start? And so that's why I always think if you have a balance in your lifestyle, if you are balancing your plate out, right? And I'm not going to say, after your meal, if you have a balanced plate, eat a flippin' bowl of ice cream. Like I would never discourage that. It's all about finding that balance, which is so crucial for our health and for our mindset, is to have balance. Okay, so when it comes to something like this, working on your mindset first, if anybody discourages you to do that, I would say that is a false claim. Okay, my second one, balancing out your plate. That is including every food group into your diet. That is not eliminating any specific food group, but instead adding them all in and finding a way to balance all of them, right? So this is going to be such a good place for you to start and then see how your body reacts to certain foods within each food group, which we're not going to get into today. Okay, so let's go ahead and keep going. So after we have, half a plate fruits and vegetables, we have a fourth a plate of our starchy carbs. You're going to do a fourth of your plate a lean protein source, or like I usually say, 10 to 20 grams of protein, depending on how much you're getting in your other meals, or this could look like your palm, so if you look at the palm of your hand, about that much. And so like for me, I had said I'm trying to increase protein. So I am trying to get a little over 20 grams of protein at every meal, but that's really hard. Okay, especially if you're feeding a big family, meat is really expensive. I know it can get costly. So that's why I always say just a fourth of your plate. It'll vary depending on how big your plate is, right? Or if you're looking at your palm, it'll vary depending on, the size of your hand. But at the same time, it's just a good estimate of how much you should be getting in every setting, including snacks, just to make sure you are still supporting your body with protein. So I say lean protein as well, because if you're getting that healthy fat from somewhere else, from mixing it in with your vegetables or your starchy carbs, you don't necessarily have to get that healthy fat source from your animal protein. Okay, so when I go shopping, I typically try to get like a 93% lean and above, but I would really encourage you to just eat what you have access to. So if your family butchers a cow and you get half a cow and you have that in your freezer and it's 83% lean, can obviously eat that, right? Because, we don't have to get so specific with every single number to support our body. And I think that can kind of get lost too in translation sometimes, is if it's something you've been doing for a while, it can feel easy to buy 96% lean protein. But if you don't have access to that, you don't have to avoid something just because it's not super lean. Okay, it's still a protein source. It's still an animal protein source, which I also think is a double bonus. And I just don't want you to feel like this all has to be super calculated, because again, that can quickly feel very restrictive and very confusing. So let's go ahead. I'm going to walk you through a calculation for protein. If this is something you're interested in, if you're like, I just need to fill a fourth of my plate, I'm good, perfect, ignore this. But if you're interested in knowing how much your specific body needs, let's go through a little bit of a calculation here. And I also want to say I'm terrible at math, so if I can do this calculation, I know you can too. So what you're going to do is, if you're lightly active, I want you to take 0.6 times your body weight in pounds. So lightly active would look like you maybe go for a walk 2 times a week, okay? Then if you're moderately active, you're going to take 0.8 times your body weight. So again, this is working out 3 to 4 times a week. If you are highly active, this is going to be 1 times your body weight in pounds. So this would be anywhere from like that 5 to 7 range. And then if you are anything above that, like if you are a college athlete, or if you are training for a marathon, or if you are doing CrossFit, those are very, very intense forms of exercise. So you could really go from like 1.2 to 1.4 times your body weight. And then that would give you probably a closer estimate to how much you would need, again, if you're that very, very highly active person. And so I think too, protein often gets forgotten about, especially for women. But that's what's going to stabilize your blood sugar and keep you full for longer. It curbs those cravings you have throughout the day, and it supports your body externally by giving you strong hair, nails, clear skin, and internally by giving you more energy, less brain fog, better digestion, increased strength. And of course, too, this works together with those carbs, healthy fats, and fiber to just really make this all happen, right? And so with protein too, if you notice like you, after you eat a meal, so say you eat breakfast and it has everything in it minus the protein. So I'm going to give an example like with overnight oats. That used to be a big breakfast of mine, I'm sure, if you followed me for a while, but I would do oatmeal, and then if I wouldn't add the protein powder, it'd be like oatmeal, milk, a little bit of maple syrup, and cinnamon. And then in the morning, if you top that with berries and honey or granola, you can see the one thing, and a nut butter, I should add that too. The one thing you're missing is that protein source. So you might be full for like 2 to 3 hours after that, but you are going to notice a spike in your blood sugar levels because you don't have that protein to balance it out. So you're going to spike, then you're going to dip, and you're going to start to feel either really, tired, brain fog, you have a headache. That is what happens when you are not getting enough protein in each meal, is you maybe feel okay for a little bit, but then afterwards you're like, okay, I need to get some food in me because I do not feel good. So protein is a very, very crucial piece to the puzzle. Depending on if you're trying to get, whatever you need for your body weight, or really just filling every meal with a source of protein, that is going to help tremendously, okay? The last thing I want to go over is this method of replace, don't restrict. So I want you to think right now about the first time you ever read a food label. And so I'm going to guess what the first thing you'd look at is, and I'm going to say that's probably calories. If it's not calories, props to you, because I have asked this question so many times, and I feel like the answer I get almost every single time is calories. So it's very common, and I think especially if you've done a lot of diets in the past or tried to lose weight, we believed that eating too many calories were the cause of your weight gain. And in a sense, that's not false, right? That's not inaccurate. But the truth is, it really was the quality of your calories. So that's when we talk about anti-inflammatory foods versus inflammatory foods, minimally processed versus highly processed. The quality of your calories are depleted when it's highly, highly processed. So if you're looking at a food label, your eyes should scan first to the food list, the food ingredient list. So that is going to feel a little uncomfortable for you if this is the first time you're doing that. And I want you to check if the first 5 ingredients are canola oil, soybean oil, vegetable oil, high fructose corn syrup, artificial colors, or flavors. Okay, so if yes, then I would label that as an inflammatory product. But I also have a side note here. I say this with a little bit of leeway, not even just a little bit. I say this with leeway because balance is always going to be key to a successful diet, and a diet in a sense of what you're eating every day, not like we're, doing an anti-inflammatory diet to lose weight or anything, but just to physically feel good. It's not going to work if you don't have balance and don't have the mindset that balance is okay. I say that a lot because it's so important. You cannot be successful and restrict yourself from everything you've ever loved. Like, it's just not possible. So if you look at, your favorite food and you see, oh, it's inflammatory, do not just toss it in the trash and say, well, gosh, I guess I'll be miserable forever because I can never eat that again. No, that is where the mindset work has to play a piece, because if you look at a food and you're like, oh, well, this isn't the best for me, but also if I enjoy this, let's think of like Oreo cookies. If I enjoy this, a couple after my meal at supper, am I really hurting my body that much? No, right? That's balance. That is finding a balance between really treating your body well a majority of the time, and, part of the time you're also nourishing your mind. You're nourishing the piece of your mind that's like, this is nostalgic. Eating this Oreo cookie makes me think of going to have lunch at my grandma's house. I really find comfort in eating this food. I'm going to eat it, and instead of restricting it, I'm going to enjoy it. Okay, so we're not restricting, right? And with Oreo cookies too, you don't always have to replace it with a better option. If you feel called to, like, for sure, go do that. But you can replace an object, or you can just enjoy that product and savor it and indulge in it. There is no shame in doing that, right? It's just that balance, and we're always going to go back to balance. That's why I have a platform. It's a membership platform called Balance, because if you do not have balance in almost every area of your life, you're not going to live a very fulfilling life. So it's especially crucial when we talk about our diet. Okay, so restriction is not the goal. Okay, the goal is to decrease inflammation. So that's why I bring this to your attention, but it's not to make you hyperfixate on every ingredient. Okay, so let's keep going with this. So I also want you to see on that label and check if you can pronounce everything within the product. So if not, I want you to look it up. Okay, so if you go through and you're like, okay, sucralose, like what is that? Look it up and see, oh, it's a sugar product, okay? This is all good. Although it's going to be time consuming at first, right? It will save you time in the future when you go shopping, because you know more products and more ingredients than just, an oil and a flour and a sugar. Okay, so you're going to know more, and you're going to be more educated. And with education comes power, for sure. Okay, so this also helps if you find those brands that you like, know, and trust. So this is huge for me, and especially for clients that I work with, because it makes shopping very, very simple. So you don't have to question if what you're eating is good for you, because you know it is, because the brand is familiar, you like their products, they taste good, and you know that they produce a high quality product. So these brands for me would be Primal Kitchen, Lara Bars, Hue Chocolate, Chosen Foods, Simple Mills, Bob's Red Mill, Siete Foods. And then a lot of foods from Trader Joe's have pretty good ingredients in them. Not to say every food there is a health food, but I do, for the most part, trust a lot of the items that I buy at Trader Joe's. Okay? So let's move on to 4, and this is our final little wrap-up segment, okay? I want to encourage you, if this, I talked about shopping at a grocery store, if that feels maybe just a little overwhelming, or if you're like, I don't really know what products there are going to be really good for me or be fresh and high quality, I want you to encourage you to buy locally when you can, okay? So most of the ingredients and products that you get from a nearby farmer or a business are pretty high quality, because the cost to create the product is not something they're as concerned about, right? So if you think about the food industry, there's about 7 major companies that own all of the food in the grocery store. So if they make a lot of products, eventually they start to decrease the quality of the ingredients in their products because it makes them more money. So if you think of a local farmer, like, truthfully, if you are just a small town, farmer or somebody even in the city that shows up at farmers markets, you're probably not getting a huge cut of your profit anyway, right? Because it takes a lot of time, energy, and money to grow a food from scratch, to make your own product that you can't buy at the grocery store. So they really just care about the consumer and getting the consumer to see so much value in their product that they come back to them time and time again. Okay, you're also able to grow a connection with the person selling it. And that's honestly pretty special too, because you can ask how it was grown, how it was raised, and you can get the specifics of what you're consuming, which, like I said, knowledge is just power when it comes to that. All right, so if you are looking for, okay, where could I buy locally and you don't know where to start, I would start first with a farmer's market in your area. Or you can ask a friend that has a garden or animals that they butcher for protein and for animal protein. You could also follow accounts in your area. So some that I know here in Nebraska would be Omaha Local, 402 Social, Omaha Places, and I'll link all of those accounts below so you can go ahead and check them out. But they're very good at promoting what's happening in your area. So it would give you just an idea of what's happening around you and a chance to meet and support farmers or small businesses in your area. Okay, so that is all that I have for you on nutrition. I want you to just go ahead, take a deep breath, because I know that that was probably like, holy cow, information overload. But I want to let you know that if you are leaving this episode feeling overwhelmed, do not just sit with that yourself, but reach out to me, okay? It can be through Instagram, text, whatever. Find a way to reach out to me, okay? Because you do not have to do this alone, and I'm here to talk through this and answer any questions that you have. And if you are ready for guidance or support, I do offer a one-on-one grocery store navigation session so we can shop according to your goals, your dietary restrictions, your preferences, and we can find products that work specifically for you and that I love. And so this is also included in my one-on-one coaching program, Nourish to Flourish. But really, I don't just say this and promote this because it's my job, but I promote this because if I would have had somebody to go shopping with when I was just like figuring out that I was lactose intolerant, and I could go into a grocery store and they'd be like, hey, this is a high quality dairy-free product and you're gonna love it. I'd be like, oh, like that's amazing. Like, thank you so much, because I was so lost at finding both high quality products and also knowing what the heck doesn't have dairy in it, right? Like, did you know Oreos don't have dairy in them? Like, I didn't, but apparently they don't, which, I mean, I know before I was definitely eating Oreos, and I still eat an Oreo every now and then, but like things like that where it's like, okay, are Oreos the best option? No, but like they don't have dairy in them. So if that's something you want to enjoy as that balanced treat, right? And indulge in that sometimes, like that's okay, because it's not going to upset your stomach in the sense of it has milk in it. Okay, so I say that just because I want you to feel supported. And if you're local to the area, I can shop with you and we can do that together. And I think that makes it a lot less intimidating and scary too. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this in prayer, and then I have just some final wrap-up announcements at the end of this episode that you're going to want to stick around for. Okay, so if you are driving, please do not close your eyes as we pray, but if you are not, let's go ahead and bow your head with me. So, dear Lord, thank you so much for the person on the other side of this mic and just the chance that I have to share so openly and vulnerably with them, and hopefully just encourage them to dig deeper into maybe what those fears are that they have around food, and that they're able to just answer those questions and be really, really brutally honest with themselves. And that they really just are able to identify where they need that support and where they need that guidance within themselves or within the help from other people. And that they just constantly feel supported by me and know that they can lean into me and really just share openly with me about what they're going through if they feel like they need an outlet and don't know who to turn to. Lord, I just pray that you would keep them safe throughout the rest of the day and beyond, and that they really just feel comforted by you and the purpose that you've placed on their heart and given them since birth. And again, I just thank you for them and who they are as people, and that they just continue to show your light to the people around them and support the vessel that you've given them to just nourish and flourish and live out the beautiful purpose that you have just given them, and given them to not only care for themselves, but care for other people. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right. So if you made it now to the end of this episode, I do want to ask you, if you could, I would appreciate it so much, is just to leave a rating or review on either Apple Podcast or Spotify. If you do this, go ahead and screenshot it, send it over to me, and I will get you entered into the Wellness Bundle giveaway that I am drawing for at the end of the year. And I also added a new piece to this too. If you just post that you listen to this episode on your Instagram or Facebook story, I will go ahead and enter you into that giveaway as well. Okay, so share it with your friends, share it with your family, and send me a screenshot if you do, so I can be sure to see that. Other than this, if you want to go ahead and follow me on social media, you can find me at Bailey Seaton, 2 Y's and 2 N's, on both Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. I am on there just a little bit, but have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you in a week. Bye.